Shilingi yang ngara yawa shilingi yang ngara.
Thanks so much, Shaima, for joining us at ASAP Art. And it was really lovely to see your film Don't Get Too Comfortable here as part of Displacement at Serendipity Arts Fest. And I was curious if you could start by telling us a bit about what made you make this film and how you arrived at the form of the letter to your grandfather as the narrative that threads through it.
Thank you for having me, first of all. Serendipity is such an amazing exhibition, and Rahab has been really taking good care of us. So with my work, Don't Get Too Comfortable, it is an extension of an older body of work that I had started in 2018. And I first started out as a documentary photographer, and then kind of moved on to working with film because COVID kind of brought out a different version of this practice, purely based off of wanting to explore different ways to say something. And so I had the idea come to me when I actually wanted to work on this exercise with a bunch of friends of mine, where the question was, if you were given the chance to write a letter to an ancestor of yours or a parent that's no longer, what would you say? And how much would you allow yourself to say? And that was actually an exercise I had wanted to sort of embark on like a year before. Just never really got the chance to do it. And when we kind of were forced into quarantine and I needed to find different ways to work with, to work with an idea that I needed to deliver. So I realized that I also needed to answer that question myself instead of project it onto people, or at least subject them to that before doing it myself. And I gave myself one rule, which was, I'm going to write this letter like as if I was just writing it for myself and for the person that it is intended to be, which was, at the time, I had chosen to write to my grandfather. And the reason I did that was because I didn't want to start holding back from saying specific things. And I kind of just wanted, literally, it was an exercise. So, let's see. And there I go, writing. A couple of pages went by and I was like, whoa. There's a lot there. And specifically because I know that I didn't get to meet my grandfather, but his memory still lives on today, at least within the context of my conversations with my family, because my dad keeps on talking about him. He passed away when my father was really young, so obviously I never got to meet him, unfortunately. And I just wanted to kind of find a way to connect with him, at least spiritually, in some sort of sense, and update him about what has happened 50 years after his death. So organically, I think the work started shaping into what was going to look like a film. Started recording sound, picking up more images to make with each and every member of my family. Like they all had some form of hand in the making of this. And here we are today.
So I want to come back to your family because there's a family photograph that you've constructed or taken rather, but in that is the suitcase that your father owned, and it's framed almost as if it's a part of the family, or that it's something that this idea, because the show is also called Displacement, it's the idea of how there's so many displacements that are built into a family history. So would you like to talk about how you thought of taking this family photo and why the suitcase appears in that way?
It's actually a very simple answer. So my dad's a photographer, and we obviously have a depth of photos from when before he was married, and we have albums and albums of photographs from different timelines, whether that's in Kenya or Yemen or in the UAE. But what I noticed is that we never had a family photo. And as much as we have albums of birthdays and photographs and all these random things, we've never all come together in one photograph. And it had taken years for me to not to convince them to do it, but to finally like make sure that everyone is available for this moment. And off we marched to the studio. And the suitcase that you saw in the photograph was obviously one that my father owned. It was the original suitcase that he carried coming to Abu Dhabi from Yemen, and then Tanzania, and then Kenya, and then that was his final stop at the time. So it had a lot of sentimental value, especially because it still has the same sticker on with his name and the PO box and the address that he was going to when he landed here. And like, if this had stopped, maybe that suitcase wouldn't have been there. But because I also ended up moving away from the family, I transferred to Doha, and I've been there for 15 years. And I continue to question what the next stop is going to be. And why does it have to keep continuing? Like, this is already a reflection from the last 50 years. So what's the next 50?
India is actually also going through a crisis of citizenship where there's a certain politics around citizenship and who can be a citizen, who is not considered a citizen. And you speak about how citizenship determines the kinds of opportunities that a person gets. So the film is actually very political in so many ways. It's talking about the politics of belonging. So would you like to share a bit about what that means today in a world where so much is fractured by notions of citizenship or notions of belonging?
As political as it sounds, and as far away from politics that someone can actually tell you, oh, I'm not into politics and this is not my thing. But the problem is that it seeps into everyone's daily life, that even if you think you're not, or if you assume that you're not, you're actually living, breathing the effects of all of these decisions, whether they start from the US or locally or regionally. There's always a spillover cascading effect. Having a particular citizenship, affects your life, depending on where you live. And there can be some, systemic discriminatory, ways of putting policies. And obviously you start to question, like, why does that even have to be in the first place? Like, at the end of the day, I am like you, we're all human. We all, we don't even have to do the drill of like, we breathe the same air and see the same sun and the moon. And, it's just the fact that geography can dictate, or a simple book can dictate what your fate is going to be, is just so mind-boggling. We all have so much to give to this world. We've given so much to this world, and for it to reflect back in a way where you feel unwanted or unwelcomed, or like you're less deserving, I think that's what made me feel bitter the most. And I was tired of that bitterness. And I also didn't understand where a bunch of it came from, until I actually did this exercise, and also, have countless conversations with my family and my father, who would always make sure we all know where, not just we came from in terms of the specific pinned location, but also, what everyone had to go through in order for us to be here. And, you can't just sit there and, just let things happen. I think it's about time that we take some form of control back into our hands. And, at the very least, be able to connect through talking about these things, because we don't talk about these things also. We tend to be very non-confrontational. And I think a big part of what working on this film did to me was that it was healing in a way, in a way that, like, I never really thought this is what I would feel after working on it. And I feel like we more and more just need to at least be there for each other.
I was kind of curious about how you approach the image, especially because you're using a lot of archival images. I think you've also shot with your family. It's almost like a collage work of sorts. So can you tell us a bit about your approach to thinking about the image in this context?
Working on this project was actually really fun because there were times when I had to let the letter direct what the image would be. And then there were times when I had to let the image direct where specific sentences could come. And so this also being done 4 years ago when I was still very shy and afraid, I didn't want to put myself in front of the camera too much. And to compensate, I feel like I needed specific ways in which, you know, some of the images could talk either to themselves or to the viewer. So I worked with my best friend, Mayar Hamdan, who's my collaborator also on this project. She edited and produced it. And we tried to find ways in which we could also work on like some form of animation, just so that the work also doesn't necessarily feel flat in that sense. And it was quite a fun exercise. She was very obsessed with parallax animation at the time. And I kind of also just wanted to give ourselves the room to explore a little bit and have fun with it. And that's what ended up